Okay. Thank you for coming. My name is Larry. I'm from the University of Texas. I've got a colleague of mine, Mr. Cummings. He's from InCase. We're going to talk really about a case in the context that the case has actually occurred. I want to talk to you about information, tokens, also privacy, and this tension between international kind of statutes. Okay, next slide, thanks. My slides are going to be different from yours because I'm really a professor and I've got to ask you questions. All professors have to ask questions. It's in our gene pool. I apologize for it. Okay, so my slides are going to actually be slightly different from yours. If you want my slides, they're posted on a website at the end of the presentation. Okay? Rich. Okay, for the purpose of this, I'm really a technologist. Yes, I teach at the law school. I'm not a practicing kind of attorney. I'm really a human being. Next slide. Okay, this tutorial, there's no legal advice here. If you get in trouble, you're responsible for your own stuff, not me. I speak for no university, the government, or anybody else. There's no fitness kind of guarantee for the stuff I'm going to say. Next slide. There's no grant of license. Any risks associated belong to you. We have to go through all this legal stuff. And your attendance now, we have a contract and you agree to the terms. If you don't like it, leave. How's that? Next. On that fun guy? Okay, all the slides are over here. There is a case, I have to say, from a legal point of view, it's an emotional case. In fact, it is not emotional. But I've got to say that because I don't want them to sue me. I want to sue them. They don't want to sue me, right? Next slide. Okay, please ask questions. I want to reserve the right to ask you questions to make you uncomfortable because we only learn when we're really uncomfortable, right? Okay. This is an emerging area. Anybody who says they know everything about computer forensics, I think is wrong. I think the area, particularly in terms of technology, is moving very quickly. The issues here are not necessarily computer forensics, but digital forensics. Stuff that's electrons, ones and zeros. It's important in court that you have the idea of science, theory, and peer review. Those are the ultimate kinds of tests. But frankly, I think we need a better community of practice between computer security people that is not just in the security area. There are also human rights issues here. There are privacy kinds of issues. And yes, there are surveillance issues. Those of you in the government, I apologize if you feel bad, but there's tensions between individual rights and surveillance. And I want to discuss this particularly within the United States. Here on an issue that also involves some international kind of questions. Next slide. Okay, this is a ubiquity in life. Information technology is increasingly embedding in all of our, estimated in the United States, corporate managers. Some guys at Stanford have made the estimates that 80% of the business communications that a person receives in a U.S. corporation resides in some form in a digital format. About 80%. That has web pages. Cyberspace is a ubiquitous kind of environment. We have the idea of portals for everything. Your cars talk back and forth to computer systems. Estimated that a now Ford automobile, 2003, has 7 onboard processors. That's a residual kind of data. In the U.S., automobiles record the last 7 seconds of information prior to impact of an airbag event. Most of you don't know that, but there's digital information that surrounds us all. This information has a benefit and also has a cost. Increasingly, it can be used for surveillance, law enforcement, and civil kinds of matters and administrative kind of matters. Now, as an enabler here, we need to think about the issues of digital information in both criminal, non-criminal, and proscribed activities. Corporations in America have what are called administrative rules. In other words, an AUP, an acceptable use policy. That defines the behavior that is sponsored sanctions. Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about a case. This case is called Baghdad Express. I'm going to read some things to you so you describe what's going on. Baghdad Express. Baghdad is a U.S.-based international oil firm. This is a misnomer, but basically this firm doesn't really exist. An analyst that does. Smith, a real person, or Miss Smith, was in fact a pro-manager. She was responsible for financial activities for a project at a different place in the world. In this case, it's Nigeria. That may or may not be true. She's responsible. She is based physically. Her domicile is in Houston, Texas. For a statute point of view, from a legal point of view, her legal presence, her legal state is in Texas. Okay. She's based there, travel frequently through Amsterdam. In accordance with her contract, what you and I would call her high-risk kind of position, she has to report all foreign travel. If she travels outside of her areas, she's what a high-risk position. Watch their words. And she's in what's called a high-risk kind of position, which means she has the ability to control financial resources. Okay? She sends email, like all of us, for both business and personal reasons on her company computer. Who does this? Her job. Okay? This for all travel purposes and really all of her communication needs. Her travel, also to her colleagues outside the firm. I would characterize her as a power user. She uses it a lot, like many of you. Cell phone. We all use cell phones, correct? A digital camera. She has, as a power user, as many of you have these small thumb drives. Or we have these small, portable, kind of removable devices. Many of us buy these for convenience. Some of us, I would submit, buy this with the notion of we have privacy of information. We can carry a gigabyte around, a gigabyte of data, and we have the idea that on our device, carry it with us, it's safe. Also use voice recorders. Now, what I would characterize as many of you she has to have, again, frequent travel to depart, and she normally makes her travel arrangements through a company travel agent. This is an interesting occurrence in the United States now post 9/11, that travel is monitored very carefully by both corporations and the United States. They do work on particular applications. How world. And some statistical kinds of models that determine your outlier characteristics. And if you're an outlier, then you automatically are subject to, how shall I say, more scrutiny. Again, she in this case actually had dual citizenship. Citizenship does not equal domicile. Domicile establishes jurisdiction, not nationality. The illusion will in fact not true. Next slide. She's responsible for authorizing all disbursements and tax payments. In other words, she's the keeper of the money for a Nigerian operation. She pays taxes. She pays tax of the corporation. She's the person who signs and authorizes disbursements for operations. She's using an international ISP for remote access for her internet needs, an international ISP like AOL or MSN or something like that. Now, she has been observed making anomalous payments. This observation occurred within the company. There were payments that didn't really correspond to the business plan. These payments automatically kind of trigger some initial kind of investigative activities within U.S. corporations. She's also been observed by law enforcement in some cases, about anomalous traveling. In other words, paying for travel with cash. In the U.S., that automatically triggers a unique occurrence. Buying one-way tickets, automatically occurrence. Frequent travel to what are perceived to be high-risk areas. Frequent. They have, by public announcement, observation systems that automatically determine someone is doing anomalous things. And anomalous being, how does the government define anomalous? Not normal. So we have normal, not normal. Okay. And, of course, they are monitoring kind of traffic on information. Next slide. So law enforcement automatically picked up Ms. Smith. Next slide. In accordance with U.S. Sarbanes-Oxley, a federal statute, a U.S. law, not something that somebody kind of cooked up, But basically, an internal investigation is initiated because of the strict issues of strange payments, non-authorized payments. The company elected to do what we would call an internal investigation. They met the legal barrier of probable cause. Wait a second. Probable cause means this is not normally expected in the firm, and that is the threshold barrier for what you and I would call probable cause. An informant in the firm rats out Ms. Smith. Says, wait a second, this woman is being paid X. She's living in a large home. Her lifestyle is larger than average. And someone in the firm, under Sarbanes-Oxley, you can actually inform on someone by saying, and was conducting illegal stuff. That gives you a legal defense for defamation of character if you have a reasonable cause. So, the firm then decides, in this case Baghdad Express decides, let's go ahead and start auditing your call patterns. Most of you are aware of PBXs, our company-owned property. They, by definition, have the right to audit. You have no expectation of privacy in the United States about making PBX calls from a firm. None. Zero again. Okay. They use a tool most of you are familiar about called WebSense, which is a content filtering, and I think the term smart filter, isn't that the term proprietary? Proprietary. And traffic analysis at the gateway. In other words, the classic thing that many of us think about, I think you heard a discussion today about good old terrorism, who terrorists talk to. In this case, they've morphed the model of who are business people talking to. And next slide. What happened in this case, interesting kind of decision, was debate in the computer forensics profession. Many of us feel that computer forensics, because it's really a control function, should not be done internally. In other words, at a certain level when you do an investigation, to make sure you have a disinterested party. Operations haven't disinterested investigation. Skill available. This is not future stuff. An incredible, advanced kind of forensics. Something called a remote preview. Now, you and I know that in computer forensics, we used to talk about the idea of doing a physical seizure. You bust the door down. Tags on to be that we were cool and all that kind of stuff. But that used to be the model. And they've gone away, and we'll show you. Wait a second. We want to do what we call a preview. We want to see items of interest. Items of interest can be stuff that is. Many of you have AUPs that say you cannot use within a company. You cannot use your own position. In this case, we want to do a preview. Now, the old way was coming by and grabbing the device. The second old way by my government law enforcement colleagues here, we do what's called a black bag job. We would invite someone to a long meeting, get them out of the office, and we would go ahead and copy all this stuff in their computers. But that was a kind of a bad deal. But now we can exploit some kind of new technology. In this case, we decided to do an initial preview, and we want to triage some evidentiary artifacts. We were looking for what I term in this case a suspicious application. A suspicious application being an application that you can define as something that you would normally not be expected to use in the performance of your duty. Okay, and then we did what was basically called a triage for these items, and these items were done by a disinterested consultant outside. A .wav file. And many of you know they're .wav files. In fact, in a normal installation of a tablet PC, there are 39, I've counted each of them, 39 WAV files on your system. These are normal installation. You wouldn't expect a WAV file to be weird, right? You wouldn't. When you find a weird application that outputs WAV files, you go, what's going on here? Which will be a tool system was remotely acquired using this in-case enterprise edition. This is not vaporware. Suspects on a tablet PC the new law enforcement first. If you read the statutes, you have no discretion. If there's certain types of events that occur in the legislation, you have the legal responsibility to report to law enforcement. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, it is a felony conviction not to report. A felony conviction. Felony conviction. So you have to rat them out. Then what happened in this case is an interview and a subsequent arrest by law enforcement is now being planned. What is the basis of this arrest? What is the basis? Next slide. This NBA slide. I love to use this slide. What is this case about? What is this case about? Now the demonstration of as fast as we can.
Some more buttons.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Case enterprise position. First and foremost, there's three components. It's a three-tier architecture. And there's one laptop. This is an authentication server based on and this server also has one chain of custody, things to that nature. Okay, so I will log into the safe server, and then the safe server base has role-based security, which will then authorize me access to machines in my network. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is log on. And let me just start over from scratch here. Make sure I have my phone over there. It's not in it. What I'm doing here is selecting default directories where, as an investigator, I will save findings, evidentiary artifacts that I identified during my remote analysis of this machine. Okay, so I've done that now. So now what I want to do is add a device, okay? And as an investigator, an in-case investigator, I am allowed to access local devices like standard forensics, attached to local machines, created image, things of that nature. Evidence files are existing bitstream images that I've created. The enterprise edition. The enterprise folder allows me to see machines in the network. My role allows me to preview. And I'm going to select this IP address, 10.10.10.11. Normally it would be a machine name, but I'm not running DNS here on my two machine networks. So the next screen that pops up is a graphical view of all the media attached to this machine, which is right here. This is Larry's machine.
I'd like you to look carefully at this. Notice that it's enumerating the logical attributes of the suspect platform. I'd like you to look carefully. Notice that it's called the network. Have no illusion.
The local area network. This can be done over the internet. I invite your special attention to the last logical device, which appears in this case to be a removable thumb drive. Again, a thumb drive. When a thumb drive is attached to the suspect platform, it can be enumerated. So your illusions about having security by having it on a removable device, I hope, are now shattered.
If this person, Ms. Smith, were to have a PGP disk, she were to have that PGP disk mounted on a logical volume right now, I would see it here as a logical volume, and then I would be able to select that and preview that drive as well. So different way of looking at accessing encrypted file systems while systems are running. So what I'm going to do is select here this physical drive number 2, and I'm also going to select this drive as well. Physical disks. In case offers also show logical volumes as well. So we're going to select the physical disks because we get more sectors. Usually select the physical disks. So I click next. Go to network, and this little progress bar that says reading devices is going over the network. It's reading just the MFT, just the master file table.
The break region is full.
Okay. Unallocated spaces of file, slack spaces of file. So when now that I've got these hard drives loaded up in my case, right here it's like a Windows Explorer graphical user interface. So I can drive through the file structure as if I was local on that machine. Okay? And since Larry has let me know the investigator, I'm looking for a file of a certain type. What I can do is I can select every single file on both of those two physical disks and then run a filter based on the file signature and extensions. So on those two physical drives, there's a total of 11,341 files. I'm going to now run a filter for WAV files, for sound files, and now very quickly, in-case will do a filter based on those extensions and headers, and let me know that there's 130 WAV files. Now it's just a matter of me going through it, identifying that this payoff.wav file on the very top may be of evidentiary interest to me. So what I can do is now identify these items. I can bookmark them, which adds them to a report. I can then call Larry and say, I have identified some of these artifacts that you're looking for. Would you like me to do an acquisition? So then what I can do is I can select both of those physical disks, right click, and say acquire. Now what NCase will do is it will give me a bitstream image, a snapshot time of that live system. The system is changing because it's still running, but I'm getting a snapshot time of that system. If this is a liturgical case, we are planning on going to litigation after we have corporate security escort this away from the machine. We may want to do another bitstream image. Just put that on file and compare that to the one we're doing. Any questions?
So just before on the question. One of the classic kind of defenses is, wait a second, you copied this across the wire, therefore there could have been data change. Well, NCase has actually hashed the drive. Hashing has proved to be both from a criminal perspective and a civil perspective, both in U.S. and international courts, to be an acceptable message integrity tool. There is no question the traffic is actually forensically hashed, and in fact, ladies and gentlemen, it is encrypted as it goes across the wire. So if we forensically acquire a system in Amsterdam from Houston, Texas, there is no possibility that the data could have been contaminated.
Or if there's a Trojan on the suspect's PC.
Well, we can pull Trojans down also. Yep.
This doesn't prove that the suspect did something. It just proves there's something on the machine.
Not yet. Not yet, but give me a chance. Give me a chance here, because the golden rule in forensics, I want to tie a person to a platform, to an application, to a data stream over time. All right. Some of your network is going to cross the network. Your hard drive is going to be kind of busy, but it's not that busy because remember, the preview, it's just looking at the MFT, master file. Yes, it goes through a reserve port. Sure. Well, what we need to do is because the kind of stuff is my and one of the case points I want to make here in just a moment is there's attention. Just because we can do it doesn't mean it's right. Just because we have the technical capability. This is a good thing, because I don't want to necessarily have to get on an airplane and fly to Bongo to a new...
You sure? Yeah. He's supposed to... I was waiting for you to answer that. Okay.
Do you have some client software? Yes, you have to put what's called a servlet, which is actually a very small application. And yes, it does appear in the task manager. But let me give you the bad news. Or the good news, from your perspective. This isn't neither good nor bad. This is ultimately, in my opinion, a political issue. With the servlet that we install after consent, we put this on a domain log. Log into the Baghdad domain, and you're there on the whole line. Right, Rich?
Yeah, group policy, startup script. It's a good way of organizations make sure a servlet is on the chain for employees. But it's a 200K servlet. Once it is installed, it's about 240K. There are investigators that have emailed it to suspect people and just said, hey, this is a patch, please install it. There's kind of some social engineering. And then they'll investigate that person for the next couple seconds.
And about 80% of U.S. corporations provide basically what's called a standard corporate entity. Fortune 500 companies, this is your system. And you are which is push run and installing additional applications. Right? I think this is the bottom of the first page. That's what you put on these other tools. Sure. I could. If I can convince you, if I can somehow give you a service, I get you a service installed.
Yeah, you do need admin level, and you need to run that code on the machine at admin level. It accesses the hardware right through the hardware abstraction layer API. Oh boy, you're going to open up that bag of loans? You know what, I've got Adrian Coley here, who's a PhD in photography. He can answer that question. There's many different ways to go out DFS. Enterprise edition, since you are looking at a live system, again, if the person is mounting and running that system and it's mounted to DFS, you go in and look at it while he's looking Windows machine. Currently, the servlet runs on Win32 operating systems. We are developing a Linux and a Solaris daemon that allow the same capabilities across the network. But if you're looking at a Windows machine, it's got a VMware running. It's a VMD file. It's a VMX file, and those are proprietary file system that you could use VMware as an external viewer to mount those file systems. But we see it as one file, and we can't read it to it.
There's also a point to describe this, that hash sets are generally available. In fact, in the United States, government organizations provide hash sets for free. You can hash a tablet PC that says 979 known files. A normal standard installed tablet PC have 979 files. Now those files can be hashed. If you have a good hash number, there's no reason to investigate. But you want to find that file that are with known code and the board code and known hash. You'll notice at the bottom, these actually require that we can be pulling content of the hash file from the system. The question was, does any antivirus software recognize this as being something else?
No, thank God. No, not yet. I mean, we don't look at it as a spyware to, we don't do keystroke logging yet. That's a joke.
Now, there are some interesting things that I want you to be aware of. This tool is actually doing live state forensics, but it's really now looking at file instances in the system. It does not look at processes. So those of you that want to look right rootkit on the memory, it's not observable yet, but I'm confident it will be observable. It's my job to defend that in court or attack it. Rich, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Well, surely, when you're solving a machine, in some point of time, the victim must notice that there's some strange behavior or activity on
Why? Because companies like, for example, when I used to work in Leibrock, they used to install Tivoli stuff all the time. These systems managers are SMS levels. And how many of you are at the console of your system all the way long? There's network latencies going back and forth. How many of you really spend time on a server, not a server, but on a desktop system, watching what's on the disk? I don't.
But you don't know either. For instance, if I'm in a hotel room and I'm not on a high-speed link, connected to the internet, and you're doing your stuff, that surely must cause some suspicion.
A lot of disk activity and I/O and stuff like that, yeah. It's nothing like an antivirus scanner, though. You know when your antivirus kicks off, sometimes the machine will practically lock up. If you're running a P2 or higher, there's minimal process activity. There is disk activity, obviously, but not process intention at all.
I got miles to go.
Those editors that we nature, they pretty much get these categories in something like open, get data back, or
Well, number one, you have to ask the question. Evidence eliminator takes a lot of two. I've done experiments on seeing how well evidence eliminator works. And you really got to have a forensics tool. At the same time, you've got the evidence eliminator. Then get a system, clean it up, and see what the forensics tool will find.
It takes a full-time job.
It takes a full-time job. The second thing, it depends on who you really piss off. If you really piss off somebody who has a lot of money, it's pretty well known, it's widely known now, that even regular software tools to wipe drives can be recovered. And if you read some of the affidavits, clearly they've been published in some of the recent trials in the United States, there is ample evidence that data can be electronically recovered. If you don't believe me, there's a forensics guy in New Zealand named Peter Gutman. He's got a very nice article about electronic remnants that basically are pretty persistent. Well, they also come down to the source on competitiveness. If you have $100,000, you can buy a great match. If you piss
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, back to the question.
Well, I'll leave it there. I'm sure we have probably some five people from law enforcement or legal attorneys hiding in the audience.
Need people to ask.
Plus, you don't just have to invest in employees.
Anybody got, okay, I just think NBA question. Now, I have a rule of 5 plus or minus 2. What's this really case about? Anybody got an idea? What is this case about? What's this case, what's Baghdad Express about? Give me an idea. Investment, okay? Anybody got some other ideas?
Suspicion.
Suspicion? What else?
Paranoid employer.
Paranoid employer, that's not bad. How about an employer is also, how about an environment where people become a little bit how about a whole cultural environment where managers are worried about criminal convictions or potential criminal convictions based on employees? How about also kind of problems with the notion of standing? For example, in some cultures, it's okay to pay someone an agent rate. In other cultures, which maybe in the form of expense legal, but other cultures, that is a prescribed activity. I mean, the notion of bribes and agent fees, they refer to the same theory. These are by definition not technology issues. They are not. And I think they describe this great new world order. My ideas about these slides, next one, I think this case, is really, look, we've got new forensics, and by definition, forensics means getting evidence for court that may morph into this idea of surveillance. And surveillance is observing people. Now, maybe you go, well, we don't live in a surveillance society. Well, this morning I got up and walked around the hotel, approximately 2 kilometers, and counted 6 TAs. 6 TAs. So, frankly, we're already here in a surveillance society. Now, what I want to also talk about is remote evidence acquisition, where we used to have physical search warrants, bang the door down, grab the box, now we don't have to. And this is an advanced tool that's going to get better over time. We also have this idea of rich Windows XP artifacts. Rich data. There's lots of rich data. XP, by definition, is designed to be a multimedia platform. It automatically recognizes multimedia types. You put a multimedia artifact on a USB, plug in the back, and XP recognizes it. And this rich media is a good thing. In one context, it's a bad thing in another context. Many of you are new to the idea of computer science. But the idea is looking at information that is of interest with the contemplation of either administrative sanctions or legal sanctions. I also want to think about this case is really about a 9/11 trial, post 9/11. Make no mistake about it, many of you are Europeans. 9/11 is a traumatic event in the United States. Managers are concerned, people are concerned, and perhaps utilities who thought about it. This is my own personal opinion. I also think that we've got a U.S. corporate environment. Post-Enron, they're executives. Now, they're not culpability. They're MBAs that are concerned about how do you put your resume and which prison you're incarcerated. They're concerned about stuff like that, and likewise they should. We also have this tension among human rights. We have the right, the expectation of rights. It's a culture. We think about how do we harmonize this, given that everyone here has some international title interest. And I think these things need to be discussed about us as technologists. It's not our job. It is not our job to determine what is right or wrong. These are fundamental philosophical questions. Next one. Okay, this is the way the technical structure works, and I'll let Rich talk about it real quickly to make sure you understand how this system works. It is a client-server application. It is not peer-to-peer yet.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. As we described before, the 3-tier architecture, the investigator's workstation logs into the enterprise server, the safe server, which then reaches out to the suspect nodes. The protocol that we developed is almost like Kerberos, based off of Kerberos, and that the suspect machine will then try to contact the investigator's workstation directly. All transmissions are 128-bit AES, FIPS 140-2, and there's an individual session key created for each endpoint along the way to defeat against time-based attacks and direct connect capability in case you are behind an added firewall or some kind of gateway blocking device. There is a switch within the protocol to allow direct connections back to a specific IP address and port. The where applies for patent on the protocol as well. On his machine, what will he see? Yeah. Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, you're an employee. We've got the server on your machine. You want to know when I'm looking at your machine. So you turn on tiny personal firewall and turn on logging.
I don't have a personal firewall, but I have a logging on Windows XP.
Okay, so you set up logging, event logging. You'll see an event, that's it. That says that this service has been accessed. That's all. We are in a read-only mode, but there's a service listening. So the service just creates an event in the system or application event logging, that's it. No, not at all. No, because we don't use any Microsoft security. We usurp all that security within Microsoft.
There's a danger in this product as well, because people think it's going to be a piece of software saying this is what the on-page hunter receives. This is what we're really doing. Okay. No solution is perfect.
Right, whose fingers are on the keyboard, that type of thing?
Well, imagine your on-page server running.
Yes.
It runs, it's actually being tweaked. There's been a patch out there of one of the index. So it sees one index. Okay. But the disk you actually use over, you use a different disk on a different machine. So what it sees is fine. What you do is something else. See what I'm saying?
No, I don't understand.
What I'm really trying to say, you have this end-page server.
Sure.
If the server's looking at your PC, looking at the disk, you have another disk which is headed wrong by somebody.
Like what means?
One of these guys is probably using the software to do it.
What, Area 51?
Well,
Area 51 changes the geometry of a hard drive from 20 to 10 and will tell your BIOS that the geometry has changed. Encase accesses the disk at a physical level, so it will know there is a geometry hiding tool on there. So there are some tools out there that we will not be able to see.
And I think the point is well taken. There's a challenge to respond.
And frankly, this is going to escalate. This is going to escalate, and for every solution, there's going to be a hide around. And that's one of the challenges, I think, of this kind of technology. Okay?
Yeah, we do not play you can have plug your gas on here. Power off the machine.
What if I do a port forwarding to another machine?
Very good. Well, we do listen on our port, as a service, and we are registering our own protocol with IANA. So eventually there may be an application proxy for a firewall based on this. Yeah, the network we do resolve machine names to the service, so when you do access a machine, I may be accessing Bob's machine, but if you do a port forward to another machine, I don't know how that would work.
and again, I think this product's all about consent. I'm an employee of this business, and I consent to use this.
Well, that's the thing. If you work at an organization, they make you sign the AUP.
Yeah.
I know I signed one when I came over to guidance software. I had no privacy, right? So, yeah.
You're exactly correct. It would be implied consent. But I would also like to invite observation. So there's this send emails out a lot. You buy proxy servers. The proxy servers don't necessarily help within a corporation. So within a corporation, and monitor stuff like SSL, SSH, and And automatically, when you start using that within an organization, they say, maybe an item here. Also, anomalous money transactions. There is no question at the federal and international level, money movements are monitored. There's absolutely no question. And if you don't believe me, the U.S. versus Scarfo, where a guy was actually moving millions of dollars, laundering it out of a cigar factory in New York. And he was convicted fundamentally on money laundering operations by just watching money traffic kinds of stuff. International travel patterns, particularly after 9/11, are monitored very closely, not only within the United States, but internationally. We also, I think this case is about what are the implications of disk remote acquisitions. I mean, many of you may have bought a USB thing. I got privacy of information carried around. Well, in this environment, when I'm in a corporation, I have an AUP policy in place. Security has nothing to do with real security. It has nothing to do with it in this case. It's totally... Where a person in Africa says, look, tax collector, and I want you to pay me X, and I'll give you Y. Right? Now, in some societies, that's okay. That's okay. That is what business is done in the world. In the U.S., it happens the way it's done. And in this case, it was a U.S. employee. The activity Ms. Smith made the kind of decision about, well, maybe I need to be rich here too. I mean, I'm working hard, I'm flying around a lot, maybe I need to get all this money. And responded to the book. He sent some information to this gentleman. It was actually much more simpler than that. Now, many of you go, well, WAV files are kind of interesting. Well, when you look at a WAV file format, a tool that was not in the AUP and simply the file pushed, whereas a sound file split. What's found is by the application. Again, to go back to the forensics point of view, you want to tie a suspect to a platform, to a suspect application, to data over time. It's pretty nebulous. We have third graders who know how to change time on computer files, right? Right? Excellent. That's not taken Zurich. I want you to look very carefully at the PowerPoint file. What she's done is basically taken a picture. Picture of two WAV files. And fundamentally, she actually used a picture on top of a PowerPoint presentation, actually on a Word document. Hard stuff to do. Get the shareware application. And there's diamond cut, which takes basically a sound file and 10,000 times. And you can actually this case, the challenges in this particular case, produce it.
Evidence only occurs by one place, the trier of fact, the judge, the jury, or in some cases the tribunal. Evidence is not done by forensics people. They produce whether items are known. Broad test for the defendant, reliable, completeness, and complete interference. The completeness thing is kind of interesting. There's been tests, but wait a second, you didn't look at all the WAV files in the world, so how do you know this one was there? Well, Fortune said that it has this kind of you don't have to give a complete enumeration of U.S. versus Hansen. Hansen, a former FBI agent, kind of stuff. In this case, you've got to have demonstrated expertise. I personally feel most forensics should not be done within a corporation, within a corporate context. I think it's better to have a disinterested kind of consultant who doesn't know this, because ultimately you have to contemplate this is going to go to trial. You have to have a disinterested kind of relationship. Yes, there was a case in Texas of a forensics investigator that actually did the job on his boss's system. Not a good thing. You want to have a disinterested kind of relationship. Examiner qualifications, increasingly they are asking, you cannot get this simply by the overall knowledge, skills, and experience, KSA. Well, I read a book about computer forensics, and I bought some software. I bought Leibrock, and by the way, I did also buy, what was the other tool I bought? Sleuth. That makes me an expert. It's also a question of what skills or cases you've done, what training you've done, and increasingly they try to test your technical ability. In some nation states will require to be certified, will require to have an examination. That's particularly common under dealing with observation. Processes, I think this is an accepted process. Not all processes do not follow the identical procedure. Is an article, and you show you have chain of custody, and if you don't have chain of custody, you don't have a case. I actually heard a law enforcement agent once testify that, well, Your Honor, we couldn't find the original image, but that doesn't mean it's false. The judge said, well, we can't find it, it doesn't mean it's false. The judge says, don't order from that. So it was a bad thing. Chain of custody, you have chain of custody problems, you got big time problems in forensics. Go find another case. Peer reviews are repeatable, and perhaps most important, particularly in the U.S., it's not what you know, it's what you can explain to a jury. To juries, not much time. Not very few lots of time. Next slide. Instruments, we have to avoid cross-contamination. This is a particular problem in hacking cases. We've actually got to pull data off of live boxes. Finding a match cross-validate, one of the things I hammer on is local use tool. Never trust one tool. In fact, if you're a forensic examiner, never trust anything. Use different tools to cross-validate. Prior use, how many cases it's done? In case has been challenged reported at least 4 times I know of. But almost all forensics tools are being challenged, and we actually have to show they've been accepted previously. Act-based, in the final sense, a forensics evaluator, forensics person, has one duty to tell the truth. He may be paid for by the belligerent parties, the defendants, doesn't matter. Increasingly in the U.S., they are what's called special masters. They are working for the judge. He has a single duty, which is telling the truth. That's very good test. Get that one. Get measures. This is a definition. One of the great things you'll find in every court case when you go to trial, they will ask you, well, what is your definition of forensics? There is no international single standard for okay, next slide. This is the generalized framework. If for a hypothetical person, if you work for a company and they seize your system, this is the procedure they would normally follow. And this is an interesting slide for some people to have contemplation of your system they can see. Because if they deviate from this framework, you probably don't have adequate time. Protection, discover files, unallocated space, this is key transfer searching. But this sounds intuitive. Maybe you go, this is obvious. This is obvious with item 6, research for key term. One of the things I always hammer home is I want to see the physical evidence. Don't give me this one, I want to see the evidence. No, I just want to do this done. No, I want to see it over here. What an investigation. But they knew someone was reportedly laundering money. And they were doing all sorts of searches all day long for money. So they said, yes, I want to see it. It's a 14 months, it's a title. I want to see it. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not want to work money. We make sure it's not. United States, you get the adversary kind of thing. You have to assume when you start a forensic investigation, particularly in a window to your file. And those of you that go, wait a second, I just want to be the examiner, I want somebody else to testify. In law, if you touch the evidence, you're going to trial. Everybody will be in any work on it, gets put up a business suit, and go to court. Therefore, you go to deposition. There's some problems here. We talk about the collection of certain kinds of data can alter the state. Now, this is not only computer systems, but like Palm Pilots, where they're C devices. The C's are C devices. You get to have the experience of keeping power on it forever until it goes to trial. We also have some problems on certain types of data which is not persistent. For example, your cell phone. Your cell phone is seized. You can't hash it because that hash is only good for one moment in time. Hash it 2 seconds later, the hash doesn't match. To my knowledge, that has never been tested in the United States. But I'm confident and we'll get better laws on that later. Investigations cases are really new, particularly in the United States. Many local law enforcement people are just kind of new to this. And I know police in San Antonio, where a computer was seized, they didn't have enough room in the luggage in the storage area, so they put it in the cops' kind of waiting room where the cops would play games in the computer system. That got that off. So it's kind of new to our law enforcement. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, these are the measures that you will normally expect to be challenged. If you have a good attorney, let's say you're arrested, drag this slide out and say, wait a second. For all these processes involved, are they understandable, are they sound, are they subject to kind of demonstration? You can't demonstrate it in court, talk about some problems. The federal government sometimes has special tools which are called classified. They will rarely bring those to court because if you have to bring classified tools to court, you're going to send them to peer review. They won't be classified. Now, it's not only true in the United States. I believe that's true in 2 states I'm aware of in Great Britain. They use specialized government applications which could not be demonstrated in court. Can a prosecutor prove that subject person was the sole inventor of platform? Well, this is kind of a challenge because Windows cabinets have multiple times. And the way we typically do this is by looking at folder structure, by looking at the accounts served on different folders that user. There has been one case that I was involved in where the university decided there was someone who was using pornography. And we were following the information to find out. And we're working on it. It's been 200 years. We're still working on it. We're working hard on it. But you know what? The new administrations, every time you elect someone, they have a different opinion of what pornography is. Anyway, the university was going to hire a lady, an older lady, for pornography. And I was brought into this case. And you know, you don't really get the light to kind of sense someone who says, well, this is so much better than the light, you know, West Texas. Everybody's going to love pornography, at least in West Texas. There's something wrong with it. We started looking at the file time. This file was over 8 times. She was administrator at the university. She came in like all administrators at 8:30. These are 4:30. But the file times of some of these days, Debbie does Dallas or whatever, it could be 11 o'clock at night. So I walked in the investigator and said, you guys don't have a case. He said, what do you mean? Gigabyte of pornography on computer system. We're going to roll out of the university. I said, let me tell you something about it. She didn't download it. What happened is she leaves the computer on. I went hanging up there surfing the net, getting a study square. That's what happened. So you have to be very careful about just because someone has an account, you cannot necessarily tie them to the workstation. And unfortunately, we have lots of overzealous prosecutors that can't wait to send all these bad pornography to jail. Okay? Is there any ways to alter or modify? This is a great one for those of you that are on the dark side. Next slide. Evidence compromising their attorney privilege. That's the great thing on the Enron has been going on for years. They say, wait a second, you can't have all the Lotus Exchange files because some of those files deal with suspects that are communicating with their attorney. Therefore, that's privileged communication. You can't get it. So what happens is they have to define a third party. The third party is the person who gets to read. And figure out which one is privileged or not. You don't want that job. You do not want that. day, you don't want that job. So they have to have a disinterested party, but the technical term of this is known as special master. His job is to determine what's equivalent to time. Okay, is there a possibility that another person network or malicious code? This is a new area for the FBI. The FBI actually does these great searches, and you ask them, what did you search for viruses? No, no. Those of you who have some spare time, go to www.pestcontrol.com. There's a tool you download that actually finds marketing tools. It finds web bots. It finds viruses. I've actually seen a system that was seized by the government, and I was on the other side, and had over 2,000 web bots, malicious applications, and viruses. And you don't know what was stuck on the system or not. You don't know. And so one of the areas we're looking at now is particularly malicious code and viruses, particularly on internet kind of traffic. Was the search lawful given the nature of the allegation? The case you saw in Baghdad, from Baghdad Express, her attorneys are really questioning, wait a second, this is lawful search. Did you really have probable cause? Or were you picking her out because she was passed over for promotion? We'll see how it goes. Okay, I want to talk to you about tokens and tagging. What a token is. A token is something that's intentionally done in your system. You all know what tagging is, right? What's a tag? Excellent, what's a tag? Somebody's got a question about tagging. Okay? Okay, open up, when you go home tonight, open up a JPEG picture. You open up the first 40 characters, 40 bytes. Actually, you'll see in most cameras something called an exit. An exit is a tag. It tags the camera that was taking the picture. The picture also means the date when the picture was taken from the camera. Also describes some cases in red. You open one up, you have a tag for it.
Yeah, it's just going to be that.
Let's open up a tag for it. This will show you to throw your camera over. Let's see, this is a GIF tag or it's done by Photoshop. Now what's excellent, Photoshop, when you touch a picture, just open it, and automatically tag it that someone is monitoring this picture. The gentleman who was killed in, was killed in Pakistan. Pearl's picture was posted on the internet by the people who reported the killing. And actually it showed the picture was not done with Photoshop, and actually gave the camera ID. And he was actually taking a picture, like a picture of him with a Sony camera showing the picture. Pictures are a great thing to make, tagging data. And one of the great things about this page is people stuff pictures in it. Too many places taggers do not spend enough time looking carefully at the tags in the picture. And this is really rich types of data that people kind of, now yes, some of you go, you have an idea. And you need some really proprietary tools like Excel, text, workshop. It's very easy to swoop kind of stuff. But remember, some people are not rocket science. They're not medicated tagging. There are certain sound files that also have tagging that actually show you the machine recording. So there's a Sony smart media that actually can record media, and there's a cell phone that actually keeps the cell phone serial number. You all know how to tag it? Very rich. I'll slide again, probably on time.
So good.
We're running short here. Next slide. That's a bad slide. That's a bad one. Let's go to slide 39. You can't get rid of
That's it.
Now, tagging, the technical term, by the way, this has been accepted in court. It's the idea of a tagging is something that gives an object identity. It's built as part of manufacturing. Those of you who have spare time in your hands, you can go through these guidelines. Go to cybercop.org. There's a listing of U.S. statutes. And you're really kind of wondering who wrote those laws. Some of those laws, I think, were written by attorneys who never saw them. Okay. We also have a very nice international standard. There's some very nice privacy statutes. In fact, what I find interesting about coming to Europe, everybody bitches about the National Security Agency and doing echelon. Well, you don't have to go very far with echelon when you go across and look at the United Kingdom and find something called the Rights Statute, or IPA, which is kind of interesting, and it's self-inclusive, basically the ability of the government to monitor anything at one time. So this is not just think you're doing anything illegal, don't destroy your data. So there's lots of corporations going, what's the board say about data retention policies? What's the board? And in fact, if you're looking at Montana, the government now admits that the public has 18 months of notice. So data retention policy, real big things in corporations. Surveying obsolete U.S. corrupt activity and racketeering and crime. You know about the prevailing model, and again, the focus here is finding data on files, but that's also kind of changing with doing traffic analysis. Next slide. The Patriot Act basically says that the government has the right to protect itself and basically engage in surveillance activity for both its citizens and people in the United States and people not in the United States. So basically, the Patriot Act is pretty all-inclusive. And we're not well getting a cold beer and kind of saying, you know, 1984 occurred a little later than we think. It occurred a little later than we think. It's very Orwellian. It's you looking for people who are good interests that are anti-federal. It's working country. I used to think that, wait a second, we've got to have skills about, if you're going to get good in forensics, you've got to really know a lot about platforms. It's impossible. I used to think that you have to know a lot about what platforms. The trouble is, technology is moving very, very quickly. And the idea of being able to do forensics across all platforms is a specious, bogus idea. Ultimately, we're going to be good at this specialization. Ultimately, we're going to have digital forensics people that do sound. We're going to have digital forensics people that do XP. We're going to have digital forensics people that do Linux. And the areas are so complicated, particularly with the changing kinds of data. This is going to be a big area. And it's only going to get larger because it's not only a technology issue, it's a legal issue, and also a public health. One of the challenges we get our skills and access. They used to have the illusion that you could go buy a tool to be an expert. I don't think you can do that. I think you have to do it right. You have to go training a lot because new tools and technology comes out. You know, Windows Server 2000 is not in the file system. So what are the implications of that? What are the implications of the next release on Linux? What's Solaris? Inter-process calls? We don't know those kinds of things. And really, the idea is, when you go to court, they're going to ask you what skills, knowledge, and experience and training that you have. So you have to be self-taught. I want to talk about that again. First slide on more XP tablet. Tablet's really interesting. In fact, for a money laundering tool, tablet's a great device. It's got multiple. I believe we have 255 users on the tablet. I was told that by Microsoft. I believe everything Microsoft does. The Microsoft even bigger. I think that was about that. It's a really interesting tool. From a forensics point of view, it's your worst nightmare. You have multiple languages. It also has something called a .journal file. Journal file is kind of interesting. And you get a choice of converting them to text. Or saving the graphic. Going to look through each graphic as a visual function. It takes a lot of time to analyze each particular graphic because they can write. So looking at it from a forensics point of view is not a fun thing. These devices also are pretty promiscuous in terms of their networking kind of stuff. They're pretty easy to kind of connect. The tablet PC operating system is really Windows Professional, Windows XP Professional. And if you want a hash set, you go to my site, www.trader.com. I actually have the hash the entire XP tablet set. These are details. It's in your handout. You can kind of go through it in your environment. The hashing is actually a pretty interesting place to start. One of the great things about any case, you can hash your own system very quickly. Next slide. These are more technical kinds of issues about the operating system you're interested in for XP, tablet. Okay. The book sequence, we run some experiments at the University of Texas, and about 30% of your files are adjusted by starting up that seems about 30% of your files. Therefore, from a forensics point of view, We all know about hash sets. Hash sets, yes, it's possible to spoof a hash set in MD5, and I've been asked that at title, is it mathematically possible, Dr. Leibrock, to change the MD5? Well, yes, but I've certainly been in that potential problem by actually doing proof mathematics, solve MD5, and shop, Next slide. Okay, these are the tools that I always take a look at. In this case, we looked at anti-forensics tools. There were none in the system. There was application metadata. She did conceal media, and actually it was enumerated on a device just language. And the sound files were there. The way we tied the system was Diamond Cut, which was a unique application, which was really a compressor of files. It's designed to do this. Okay. Boy, in 5 minutes, let me show you one thing. Go ahead and speak on that for a second. And I want to show you how we found the slide. You're both watching it? You're both good? I'm going to go talk about it. Okay, let's go back to the picture here. How's the picture here? Okay, if you see this slide here, the way this was moved across, actually what happened is she embedded this slide in a Word email and said, I will meet you where this airplane is. And the instructions were actually hidden. Of course, it was only the compressed file. The compressed file was programmed into the second display on the back. So this is the save application, the put
Are you finding specific computer forensic laws to be created, or is it mainly basing on precedents from previous cases?
Laws by definition really have to be made in 2 places. They're made in the courts, which is really where I think they should be made, or legislators will try to pass legislation which ultimately be passed in the courts. Unfortunately, this is the arena of going to court. And as your earlier discussions today discussed about how it was the NSA or CIA or whoever they are, those other people, how they swept witnesses. It's also the proceeding in most statutes. I mean, in most court settings in the United States, they will not directly try to turn a suspect, but just meets the family. In other words, that's why you see cases of like in-on suspects that are not necessarily being charged, they're charging their wife, they're charging their father with some tax violation, trying to squeeze the suspect. Unfortunately, the law in the United States, they can't put it on the system to go to the full digital forensics judicial proceeding. And that's a long time. That's a long time. Now, what I think this whole discussion has been about, from my perspective, is the kind of emerging tensions we have between security, forensics, the arguments. Rich, you want to say anything?
Anything you wanted to see with the tool demonstrated?
No, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do, there has been an IDS signature. We've done sniffer trace files and provided those so that people can create signatures for this protocol and this network activity. Plus, when we register with IANA.org, there will be a protocol so that you can look for that on your firewalls. But most gateway devices will stop it. Also, the servlet runs on a specific port right now, which is 4445. And so you can look for activity on that port.
I've done at least 15 years of forensics jobs in the last 18 months. Yet to see logging turn on. I know of two federal penetration systems in the United States where logging, when my case was turned on, the organization said, we don't have enough time to look at the logs. And I know another case where logging was turned on and it was slowly slowing down. And in my opinion, logging appears to be intuitively a good thing, but most people don't spend enough time waiting to it's my own life. You know, but if you're really concerned about it, they're ready to use it. Yes, the system, you can observe by the log file, there are anomalies that occur in the system. Okay?
Just to add one more thing to your question about identifying it, there is, a PKI tied to this product. So much security is tied to this product that if it was used as a corporate espionage tool, somebody got a job as a secretary and came in and tried to deploy servlets on your network. So if you did identify a servlet, there is key data tied to that, which guidance software does keep, so that if you identify a servlet, presented us with the servlet, we can say, well, we sold this to the XYZ outfit and provide it to law enforcement. And I can show you right here. Sorry? I couldn't hear the question, but it sounds like it was a joke. Now, what was the question? Yeah. Well, it's based on PGP, Open PGP standards.
Now, in this class, we really focused on this for liturgical forensics evaluation. The tool has other purposes also. We can use this tool for things like actually doing quick incident response, where there suspect Trojan. Well, actually, I can show you a couple of different tools. Also, what I like about it, if you go through the registry, this would be a normal person for this tool. Here, we limit those normal very quickly.
One of the things I'm showing up here right now is remotely running the search and the hash functions. In an enterprise environment, it's very powerful to be able to load up 100 machines, run a hash function, and then have your baseline hash sets of your known images, like we can see here, 2000 server with IIS baseline, right? Based on the MD5 hash, digital fingerprint. What I can then do is run a filter to remove known files and DLL cache files. So instead of looking at 20,000 files, now all I'm looking at are what are called notable hash sets. And these can be unauthorized applications.
Just take the crypto tool, one where whatever you got.
We just hashed all the Win32 executables and Perl files off packet storing security, so that if I were to search our network and hash every file and compare that against our hash sets, I would be able to identify any packet storing tool. And these are not the executable setup file. This is actually installing the file and running a differential, pulling all those DLLs and files together and then hashing those. So it's actually on the disk, not the setup file.
There's always a rootkit question. Come on, we're ready for the rootkit question. If you install a rootkit and it runs only in memory, what do you say? Right? It's a good question.
think about that?
Think about that.
Install a root kit. Install a root kit, which is resident minimum.
In fact, one of my colleagues is a rootkit expert around here, hang around, old enough had this discussion.
If you inject in a kernel, running in memory, there's no instance of this putting a single system. Rich, go ahead and answer the question.
Yeah, we're gonna.
I got a kernel, I got a program, I got a kernel.
Did he load it remotely, or did he put it on the system, load it, and then delete it? Because if he loaded it on the system locally and deleted it, we're going to see a deleted file resident on the system. So what I could do if I had dates and timestamps associated with snort logs or whatever, I could come in, preview a machine, go to the timeline view here, scroll over whatever that date and timestamp is. Let's change the date here to actually some real information. And time. Any one of these green dots is a file that was modified, access, created, or deleted at a certain date and time, so I can identify miles very rapidly through the timeline.
Yes, sir, you have a question back, yes, sir. How do I link it back to the system? Well, number one, I have an IP address. I basically have a forensics capture the system. And in this case, what we would do is this would be called in for what is euphemistically called, and it should be asking questions that normally probably somebody named Mr. Brown or Mr. somebody white in law enforcement, they would be asking questions. At that point, it's going to be created over the right and so I've got a suspect right now. I've got a that's my job, and that's my job. This law, suspects well, in most cases, yes, it's not about you have a perfect case. You have to find system to be perfect. In fact, rules better. You have some open system. Other systems have been trying to put in this stuff. Another rule that makes it narrow, it's just it's not fair. So rules that are really important in terms of implementation. In higher facility cases, there can be arrested in capital amounts. You better have a good rule. Okay? Or it's a pretty precise tool where you've got an oil company, you've got distributed systems everywhere. You're moving around a lot of money. You've got government all over you. This will be a great enterprise system. In fact, this kind